please come to order and the clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schrein.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
We have a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that council members Brady and Conwell are also in attendance.
Thank you very much. And do we have anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Okay. And the minutes for the February 3rd meeting are in your packet. Does anybody have a motion relative to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the February 3rd, 2020 meeting. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the minutes from February 3rd, 2020 are approved. We have one item referred to the committee, Resolution 2020-0046.
Resolution number 2020-0046, amending the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget for 2020 by providing for additional fiscal appropriations from the opioid mitigation fund to meet the budgetary needs of various county departments.
Okay, thank you very much. Presenting on behalf of the administration, the OBM Director, Walter Parfiowicz.
Thank you very much. Good morning. This item, $19 million, $19,120,172. Opioid funding being allocated to various departments and divisions. I'll start just right at the top with Children and Family Services. There is $1,750,000 allocated for the START unit, the sobriety treatment and recovery teams at Children and Family Services. $1 million appropriated for board and care. The next item is Thrive Ohio. It's $3 million. Thrive Ohio is a certified peer recovery coaches located at, I believe these are in the emergency rooms for 24/7, 365 days per year access. The funds enable an enhanced Metro Health program, and they offer services at all the hospital emergency rooms throughout the county. The next item, St. Vincent Rosary Hall, $2 million. These are also funds provided for peer recovery support in all aspects of care, expansion of their partial hospitalization program and intensive outpatient program, and also establishment of a panel for integrated care. The next item, $968,706 for Metro Health to support addicted inmates in the county jails. Next item is $415,953. This is to create opioid treatment program, also at Metro Health. And finally, $75,267 for a SUD social worker to increase support for treatment of opioid use disorders.
And what is SUD?
I'm sorry, I don't know. The next area is the Justice Center. It's $2.5 million for a diversion center. The next item, Adams Board, $5,433,000 for 32 additional residential treatment beds and a step-down transition partial hospitalization program and intensive outpatient programs for 312 more people than are being served now. There's also $300,000 for additional supports for new toxicology testing instruments, new personnel. This is within the medical examiner's office. Court of Common Pleas, $632,246 to create an additional fourth drug court, $300,000 to hire a clinical assessor. I guess this would reduce weeks-long backlogs and clinical assessments that result in drug court defendants remaining in jail for weeks longer than necessary. The next item is Family and Children First Council. It's $150,000 for a National Institute on Drug Abuse K through 12 education program. $45,000 for a Preventure program, basically to replicate other drug education programs currently used in the city of Bay Village. Prosecutor's Office, 4 prosecutors for the Children and Family Services Department, $400,000. $150,000 for 2 crime analysts for the Crime Strategy Unit. The total, $19,120,172 for 2020. I can answer any questions that I have detailed.
Questions by my colleagues, Councilman Tuma.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to first start by saying, I know the chairman's too good to say this, but the meeting started at 10:30, and it's very disrespectful to this body to have the administration send somebody so late to a meeting, barring an emergency situation. I just want to get that off my chest. No reflection on you, because I know you were called into duty.
Thank you.
And I know it's not your fault. The second thing I want to say is, or ask with respect to this, where is Ms. Carney? Because this was a position designed for her to be able to explain these types of things, if you know.
I do not know.
Okay, that's fine. If you can answer the question here, so these institutions, these facilities here, were they approached by the county, or did they approach the county to discuss these services when, requesting funds? Did they approach the county, or did somebody from the county approach these facilities?
I'm not sure. I believe my understanding was that it was a combination of the two.
Combination, okay. Because I just want to make sure that these facilities just aren't coming in asking for funds and the county saying, yeah, we have money, let's get. We want to obviously, on this body, we want to make sure that these are going to the proper facilities and making this all worthwhile. So I just, moving forward, any information we can get about these types of services that they're providing, so we're not doing any duplication, and yet still going to some of these institutions that obviously can help. I mean, there are many on here that are very good, Adams Board, other services. So just want to make sure that these monies are being used for what they're supposed to be used for. So that's my comment.
Mr. Chairman.
Council President Brady.
Thank you. Thank you, Walter. I asked or indicated for Trevor McAleer to come up. He is familiar with the process that occurred at the time that this list was made public, and it would probably be helpful for us to listen to somebody from our own staff. With the greatest respect for Walter, I know that you didn't intend to be here. We expected Brandy Carney to be here, and met with her last week. We're trying to be on top of this, but it looks like we're going to need some help, not so unusually, from our own staff to at least be able to brief us on what occurred regarding Councilman Tuma's question, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
That would be fine.
Good morning, committee, council staff. Trevor McAleer. I wanted to give a little bit of background based off Councilman Tuma's question on how this came about. So when Frank Gallucci, who is our outside legal counsel representing the county on this matter, when he was getting close and realizing we were going to have this settlement, he reached out to both the administration and Brendan in our office about that we're going to have this $23 million settlement, and this was only a couple of the folks that we were trying to recoup some money from. He requested, and he thought at the direction of the court, that it would be a good idea to have a proposal of this initial phase one money that he can present to the judge and say, this is how my client is proposing to spend this initial $23 million before what they thought was going to start the trial. Then what we did at the direction of the council president from the council staff, and we started meeting with a lot of these folks, including Walter when he was the HHS administrator, particularly the DCFS item. Then we reached out to Metro Health. We talked to folks from the Adams Board. We talked to folks from the prosecutor's office, the medical examiner's office. We had a couple of these meetings, and we probably came up with about 85% or so of this proposal from the council staff perspective and dealing with all these individuals. And then probably finished the last 15 or 20% with the county administration, such as that Thrive Ohio and the St. Vincent Rosary Hall part. And we ran this initial plan past Frank Gallucci. He reviewed it. He had his team look at it, and he asked, and if you recall, the council president and the county executive did a press conference to announce this phase one funding. Frank's goal was to get that out there prior to that trial starting, which we thought we would start. So collectively, we did have those conversations with these departments, and it was more trying to get a plan together for this phase one money at the request of our legal counsel to put this together.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, if I could.
Please proceed.
I think that's very helpful to have that back story, because again, it just wasn't sure how we came about this, but I feel much more comfortable having you guys been involved in reaching out, and the attorney for on the case being involved in that as well. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Schron is next, followed by Gallagher.
I understand what we did to make a presentation to the court as best we could at the time with the facts that we knew. And it was the desire to convince the court that we were going to use them in a manner which would be supportive of the opiate epidemic and trying to solve that. Is there any belief that the court, if they said we do intend to spend 23? By the way, I know, Walter, you only talked about 19 million, but it looks like we're scheduled to spend 23 million. I know you're only reading one column, and my assumption is you were just a designated reader. You weren't necessarily a designated person who came here with knowledge of some of these subject matter.
Correct, but I did put it on the fiscal agenda, and I only put it on for the first year, the 2020 portion.
Okay, all right. The conversations about how we're going to spend the money, were the dollar amounts set by the body, or were they set by us, or how did we come up with the dollar amounts on this, Trevor?
So the dollar amounts were derived from our conversations that we had with these various organizations. Again, council staff did not have conversations with all these folks, but the majority of these. And trying to understand the needs of DCFS, the needs of the medical examiner's office, the needs of the prosecutor's office. Some of these individuals, such as the Adams Board and even DCFS and the medical examiner and the prosecutor's office, they would have preferred to have some additional resources than what's listed here. But as you know, I mean, we had $23 million in that phase one, so we weren't able to meet all the needs of meet the request from all these individuals, but this was more of a compromise to come up with the dollar amounts listed for each individual's here.
And do you believe that, were you involved with the attorney itself on our part?
I had conversations with Mr. Gallucci with Brendan Doyle from our staff.
Okay. Was the desire to show solution, or these specific solutions that we're going to move forward? If we were to present to the court that we still intend to spend the $23 million for opiate solutions, would they be offended if we went back and reviewed whether these are the correct numbers now in hindsight, now that we've got more information and background and took a little bit longer time from this point? Are any of these things that have to be spent this week, this month, this week, this hour, as opposed to conceptually?
I can't speak, Councilman, to the court if they would be offended or not if we decided to change some of this 23 million or not. The desire at the time when Frank approached us to come up with a plan was to come up with a plan of how we're spending the money. It wasn't any specifics, and this was the result of us trying to sit down, talking with these organizations that have been impacted by the epidemic and see what we can do to come up with a plan that touched as many county-related agencies that we could.
Could it still be a plan if you went back and reanalyzed and said, are these the right agencies? Is this the right dollar amount? Have we left bodies within this county out of it that could have been included in that $23 million?
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
I know.
I'm just trying to get to a dialogue on.
Can I respond? Because,
Sure.
you know, we apparently are in charge here. And so
By absence
I'd
of
like to help
leadership.
out. And the thing is that even though the administration is absent, and with all due respect to Walter, who we all respect greatly, this was vetted with these organizations. It was believed at the time by the county executive and by top people in the administration and by our staff and by myself to be a good plan for the amount of money that was allocated in the initial settlement. We were asked to. Well, you heard what Trevor had to say. We had a press conference. We put this out to the public as the way we would spend this money, and I feel strongly that given the fact that we told the public that we would spend the money in this way, and unless there is some very specific criticism or something to add here that's positive. That we should allocate this money in the way that we told the public we would. It seems to me that it would be whether a judge would be upset about it or not, I don't know. But I think that we should not have presented to the public that we were going to spend this money in this way. These organizations certainly were involved, and they expect the money to be spent in this way. Certainly, they might have some objections to changes taking place after we announced. They were all there with us out there out there for the press conference. So they actually represent the real pros in this community on these issues, and so they felt like it was a good plan, and we told them this is the way we're going to spend the money. So, in spite of how awkward this is today, I would only suggest that in terms of this first 20 million, 19 million in 2020, that unless somebody has something very specific to add to this, that we not go back on what the leadership of this county told the people of this county and the providers that we're going to be working with, what we were going to do with this portion of the money.
Well, I'll go on the record saying I trust implicitly the work of this council in putting together the information. My question is always, we don't even have, obviously we have a meeting that the county executive hasn't even shown up or brought somebody. I feel sorry for Walter, had to be called in off the bench and be brought in as a relief pitcher for this. I know because pitchers and catchers reported last week, so that's why we figured we could go with that. The sad part is that I don't know that they did their part, and I can accept that our council president has done the right things in looking at this. My concern always is we're getting ready to spend a lot of money, and as this council, and we have not done any real vending other than Walter reading this into the record. And sadly, when he was asked even a simple question about what do the letters mean, he was not comfortable adding it. And the person who I would have expected should at least be here to answer the questions is not even here. So,
Well, I think that you're right, Councilman, that the council has every right to expect that the administration to have people that work for the administration in front of us to have a dialogue about what's in this legislation. There's no question about that. I'm just trying to help clarify the fact that this was not done in a haphazard way. This just happens to be a haphazard meeting. Presentation, something.
yeah. Haphazard is a nice way to use the phrase, because it is being recorded.
I would like to add something to what the council president said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That I believe these are all good and appropriate expenditures and very much related to the opiate crisis. Whether these are the very best ways that 19 or 23 million could be spent, there could be some dispute. But the fact is that we're going to receive an additional something north of another 100 million in the coming months, and so I think if we identify something that we overlooked that ought to be funded, I have a couple of ideas of my own, but I think that we can. That we should move forward with this list, and any additions, improvements, corrections that we come up with can be programmed into the next round. Councilman Gallagher's next.
Oh, Mr. Positive here. I would agree. We're deep in it. I should probably move forward, but I would like some answers on the addition of a fourth drug court. Here we sit, we did the budget last year. Courts came in front of us, said zero, nothing about it. All of a sudden now it's mysterious, another drug court can open for the tune of $1 million for 1 year. $300,000 for a clinical assessment individual. $300,000 for 1 year. And my history with the county tells me that once you give people money for something, they always want it. So I don't see this as a one-off thing. Maybe they need it. Maybe they gave us some statistics that make a fourth drug court necessary. Keeping in mind, we have the double amount of common pleas judges that Franklin County has. Franklin County has similar problems, and I'm not hearing about drug courts down in Franklin County. So I think they should justify having another drug court open up. Maybe it's necessary and needed and would be a good thing, but I think we need that information.
Okay.
And maybe an explanation as to why in November this wasn't even brought up. Thank you.
Okay. I note that Ms. Carney is here, but before I call Ms. Carney up, I know that Ms. Conwell has another appointment, so I'm going to recognize Ms. Conwell first.
Through the chair to Walter P., I would like to see a lot of jobs or positions for individuals that are going to help with opioids. So that's number one that I'm a little uneasy with. But under the $3 million for Metro Health, they state that they have 24/7, 365 days peer recovery coaches, and that this $3 million would go toward expanding them into other hospital emergency rooms. So I would just like to know a little bit more detail. It doesn't look like they're going to use the $3 million for additional peer recovery coaches, but I wanted to know detail. Like, are you going to utilize the current peer recovery coaches for the other hospital sites? And what are those hospitals? Are we talking about their other stations, or are we talking about UH and other hospitals? So I just wanted a little detailed, a breakdown of that. And then you also have St. Vincent's Rosary Hall, which is using the same kind of model that they're going to use $2 million for to provide for peer recovery. But it doesn't explain if they have their own peer recovery coaches currently or how that's going to go. So I would like to see if they could break that down a little bit, because I think everybody's understanding is that this opioid funding I want to see it funneled exactly to a person or a family and how they're going to get assisted. I know that means sometimes you have to have staff put in to do that, but many of, like Metro Health as well as St. Vincent's, already have staff to do that. So,
Understood.
thank you. I'll come back if I can.
Okay, fine. Okay, at this point, I would like to call up Miss Brandy Carney. And I'd like to fill you in that we opened the meeting and Mr. Parfiowitz went through the list of items that's in the first year's allocation of $19,120,000, and also Trevor Mackler from our staff kind of gave a history of how the administration and the council worked together to come up with a plan so that the people litigating the case would have some idea of how we might spend the money if we were to receive an award. So he kind of went through that history. So at this point, I will see if there's anything that you would like to add for us.
First, Brandy Carney, Public Safety and Justice Services. I want to apologize for being late today. I am sorry, Council and Council Chairman. With the sake of not being redundant, I think they covered the current allocations that were made. I have been working with each of these agencies on their implementation plan in detail. I've asked the agencies for their expectation of month-by-month expenditures, as well as what they intend to accomplish. And I've also asked them for data or metrics that I will have them submit monthly for the current $23 million.
And what's the current status of planning on the diversion center as far as what the program and strategy looks like, what the anticipated timing is? Where are we at on that?
Sure, Council. Last night, for example, I finalized an RFI, a request for information, to be sent out. As many of you know, currently our consultant, the Pulitzer Group, had put together their draft for what they've learned with their diversion center assessment. They are asking for comments back from the Diversion Center Committee, which is made up of many stakeholders throughout the county. Those comments are due back today. So the RFI I finished last night along with Pulitzer. Our intention is to release that on Friday along with the draft that they prepared. Again, to collect information from providers or agencies who might have an interest. As many of you know, a diversion center might operate a single agency overseeing the entire center, multiple providers or agencies, as well as different types of providers. For example, mental health, acute needs, detoxification, longer-term inpatient. So the RFI is to collect information from local county providers. When we do receive back that information, to read the different visions or recommendations that some of them have, and ultimately to issue an actual RFP following that.
And what's your anticipated timing on issuing the RFP?
I haven't spoken with everybody. Ideally, I would like to have it out, I think May is fair, April or May. The RFI is a little more than a usual RFI. We're asking providers to get together to plan with their other providers on how they may see this facility or operate the facility. So following that, we'd like to put something out and have something around May, but it really depends on what we receive back from the RFI. I know there are significant planning events throughout the county that are going out around now with providers and agencies. So we should get back a good amount of information, which is good.
And did the consultants weigh in on whether to primarily use a pre-booking approach or post-booking approach?
So, Council Chairman, the diversion center expectation is pre-arrest. Mm-hmm. So we'd also have to work, obviously, with judges and law enforcement throughout the county. But the expectation is if an officer is called out to a scene, an individual might be otherwise charged with some type of petty crime because something was done. But really what they need is mental health or addiction services. So in lieu of arrest, they would be given the option and taken to this diversion center. That's nationally what's often happening with diversion centers. It would not be a secure facility such as a jail. But again, when an individual is given the option of jail or treatment services, it's voluntary, it'd be their option, but they would know if they were to leave the diversion center before finishing their own track, so to speak, then charges would be filed or they would have implications with the court then. Just one more add-on for there. So that would be pre-arrest. Also, the project that's going on with central booking then would be pre-booking. So if individuals are not pre-arrest caught and diverted to the diversion center, they might end up going to the central booking, and at that time they could also pre-booking be identified for services at that time. So 2 steps in the process for identifying the correct individuals for services.
Okay, thanks very much, Ms. Baker.
Thank you for being here and giving us a little more information. As I said earlier, I certainly respect the work of our council president and certainly our staff, who I find being very thorough. And if they investigated this, I take that as it being investigated and put together with thought. My only concern here is that this was handed to you. You were not involved in this, in putting this together, am I right?
The initial $23 million allocation, that's
Yes.
correct.
You were not.
I was not. I briefly weighed in on the component about jail services with Metro and the MAP programming expansion, but that was it.
Okay, so given that, and given that we were certainly under some pressure to put this together as thoughtfully as we could in order to take the advice of our attorney, now that you've had a chance to review it and really dig in, are you comfortable with every single item that's on here, the money that's allocated? And are you comfortable in us supporting this without really having the agencies come back with their budgets and input and maybe some differences of opinion since this was created? I believe, when was this created? Back in October?
Correct.
Yeah.
October of 19.
So we are now in February of 2020 and probably have, evolved a little bit more in understanding the needs out there. I guess I'm asking you as the officer who will be accountable for these facilities and agencies and dollars that are being spent to us, is there anything that you would find that you would like to see changed or enhanced or, whatever, I guess, is the question, because you were not officially involved at the time this was put together?
Sure. Thank you, Councilwoman. I can honestly say I think the group did an excellent job identifying this first allocation. It's a good mix of prevention services, recovery, addiction services. they really did do a good job. And I feel that way, and many of the organizations that I've met with and spoke to have said that about all of the items that they were aware of, not just their own. There are a few items that don't have all of the detail right now, and I can provide one of the examples to you. One of the items under the Children and Family First Council, great program, but they've since learned that there might be some other dollars or programming from the state or another grant. And so we spoke initially. She was gathering more information about that particular program and if there's another funding mechanism available. And so we want to identify if that's the case, then maybe a redistribution of the funding. So trying to be very diligent at each item and making sure that it in fact is the best. But so far I'm very happy with all of them.
Not only the programs, but also the money that's allocated to it. You think it's enough or not enough? You're comfortable with the $23 million that was separated into all these different categories? You have no difference of opinion?
At this point, the month that I've been in the position and the agencies that I've went through in detail, the allocations seem accurate to what they're planning or what they've stated that they'll be able to do. A few of the items, like I said, they are collecting more detail and more information now, so there might be an opportunity where funding could be identified for another program, but at this point in the process, yes, I'm comfortable with it.
Lastly, Chair, I would really encourage that we take a look at each one of these to see if there's any grant opportunities, as you mentioned with the first item, and also any matching dollars that perhaps there are organizations out there that could provide some services, and they could also provide some additional funding that we can stretch this $23 million.
I absolutely agree. I have been looking, as all of you know, Walter does an amazing job, and that's just inherent for him to look at those opportunities, but I will continue to. And I'm happy to provide additional project detail on any of these items to council members if you would also like.
And I'm sorry, lastly, we have in the future now, as was mentioned, approximately $93 to $100 million that are going to be there to help those that certainly are in need. And I asked you this once before, and now it is in your scope of work before this was put together. Do you have a vision? Can you share something with us? And at what time frame can you do that? That gives us an idea of where you think that those additional dollars should be spent, and maybe have a little bit more input from those agencies to give us more detail behind those dollars. What are your thoughts about the additional dollars are yet to come?
Sure. Thank you. So a couple components to that. First, as I previously had mentioned, looking at all of these agencies that are funded currently, tracking monthly metrics to see what is working, what type of output, or how many people they might be able to help directly with those services. And so looking at that data in the next few months. Also in the last month, you're really popular when people hear about this position and wanting to meet. So I've had the opportunity to meet with a number of individuals and agencies about the work they're doing or what they would like to do. So I think moving forward, obviously an open process, but being able to, over the next couple of months, learn about some of these specifics and where more funding might be needed. I think we need a few months to look at that, and then we could all convene and share and identify the best path to reallocate more dollars or allocate the additional dollars.
I would ask that in that process that perhaps we think a little out of the box and take a look at perhaps some things that we may not be considering in direct support, but maybe in long-lasting support. There's a lot of different ideas out there that we should at least consider, if not moved upon. But this is a significant amount of dollars that is one time, and to stretch those dollars with perhaps some innovative ideas could be a possibility.
I concur, Councilwoman. For example, Recently, I attended a couple of meetings and was presented on some R&D ideas. And so maybe that's an opportunity to speak with others. We spoke to the state briefly and others about if we were to go in that direction, them possibly putting money forward too, and so that there's a pool for, more bang for your buck, so to speak. So trying to identify and look at all options moving forward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to Ms. Brown, who I don't think has had a chance yet today, and then followed by Schwan and Gallagher.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things you stated when you first came in is that you are with Public Safety and Justice Affairs. So is that still your role under this newly created position?
So, Councilwoman, I apologize. After 15 years, my position is Operations Chief for the county.
Okay.
Not specific to Cuyahoga or Public Safety and Justice.
Okay, so with that said, I'm also a little confused. So do you report to Public Safety, Justice Affairs, OBM, HHS? How do we hold this money accountable through the different chain of commands here?
Sure, Councilwoman. I report directly to Chief of Staff Mason, and reporting directly to me is Alex Pelham, and as many of you know, under him are the agencies that I used to be the director, so CCOMS, Emergency Management, Witness Victim, Public Safety Grants, and Public Safety Justice Administration.
Okay, thank you. And with that said, one of the things that has been talked about is the pre-booking and central booking, which in my opinion, I have no expertise in this area, will require extensive training with our police force so that they could be able to effectively identify the individuals that would be in need of these services. Who's overseeing and executing that portion of the training, if you will, so that we can have the benefit of these resources utilized properly?
Sure. Excellent question, Councilwoman. So in addition to, for example, the opioid, one of the projects I'm working on is the diversion project. So what I spoke about earlier was the RFI process for the center itself and the service providers.
RFI?
But request for information.
Okay,
I apologize.
That's okay.
But two other very significant components of that project, as you spoke of, is law enforcement, getting them the critical incident, the training that they need to identify individuals that they're working with. My hope is to maybe there's an opportunity to get that into their curriculum. And so myself, as well as Chief of Staff, will be working to speak with law enforcement on that training that they have. And there's also the component, as I briefly mentioned, with this would be a process change for our criminal justice system in lieu of charges. So working with the prosecutor's office and the courts on some of those policy initiatives. Both of those, the diversion and the central booking, kind of go hand in hand, and myself and Chief of Staff Mason are working on. And when, my old position is filled, then that individual would be part of it also.
Okay, thank you. So with 59 municipalities, that is a tall order, and I do want to see that be successful, because if it gets to the prosecutors and the judges, then we've missed the mark. So I just thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Simon has joined the meeting, and Councilman Schwan is next, followed by Gallagher.
Were you aware that the meeting started at 10:30?
I was aware.
When you showed up at 10 after 11?
I apologize. I didn't realize that this was an individual item on the agenda. It was a fiscal item, but that's my fault, and I do apologize, sir.
The administration obviously selected you to be here today. What is your experience with dealing with opiates, other than the jail system?
So within the jail system and within my previous role as...
Without the jail. Tell me about all the rest of this monies that we're going to be expending money on.
Sure. So many of these agencies, as public safety and justice agencies, I've worked with previously. Under my previous role as director, we had put together an emergency management, a countywide opioid planning, or a plan. That was at the onset of when we were really starting to be hit with this a few years ago. So I have been involved in some of the opioid meetings to date, obviously much more over the last month and much more engaged. And have learned a lot more. But again, a lot of these providers and agencies I've worked with for many years.
And how about handling a $120 million fund of this nature?
So
What's
I
your
can speak to
experience?
when I was Director of Public Safety and Justice. That fund was approximately, their annual budget was about $13 million to $20 million. And then over my sheriff's office and other agencies throughout the last year and a half, that budget was over $130 million.
Those are budgeted items. This is different than the fund of distributing. Have you ever dealt with a fund for distribution like this, where you're actually distributing it?
So
This
within,
is not part of their budget. These are all new non-budgeted items.
correct. So our Homeland Security grants, for example, we used to receive $10 million annually, sometimes only $1 million. That's money that annually we would receive from the Federal Department of Homeland Security. Our office was the SAA, or State Administrative Agency. So we put together, we have what's called a Cuyahoga County Emergency Services Advisory Board, took recommendations, looked at those recommendations for allocations where it made the most sense, awarded money. It was a 3-year process for most grants, followed up with those agencies, making sure they met their benchmarks, making sure the projects were done on time. So throughout the last 10 to 15 years, those grant items I have been involved with and overseen.
When you were answering Ms. Baker's questions, you talked about the funding and that you supported it, but you said that they have not given you their monthly allocation. Would that have been something that would have been something you would have liked to have seen prior to this being built?
So, Councilman, to be clear, some of the agencies on this sheet I have, some of the agencies such as the Children at First Council that I mentioned aren't quite sure whether or not they will have another funding mechanism. And so those are agencies that I haven't yet received their monthly budget. But for other agencies within here, I have.
And all these, you were asking for metrics. How many of these do you have metrics associated with before this review process, before you came into here?
Sure. Off the top of my head, I would say approximately half of the agencies I've received their metrics back. I did ask for them by no later than the end of February from each of the agencies. As they come in, we're uploading them into a system, a county system that we use. And then that system will reach out to each of the agencies monthly and allow them to populate their metrics in. So I did ask for those metrics to be back by the end of the month. So in fairness to them, I haven't received them all, but I did give them that time.
So you have half the metrics for this funding request?
I would say approximately half, that's correct.
Yeah, well, I'm just using your...
Sure.
And R&D is what?
Research and development.
And what does that mean?
So future research, planning, innovative ideals, projects that might not be 100% to fruition, but going through possibly clinical trials or has shown opportunities for advancement. There might be IT initiatives. So there might be an opportunity to invest in something now that might have a much larger investment or worth or value in the future.
Okay. Mrs. Baker was asking questions about the original creation of the list and how it was put together, and that looking at it, not necessarily critiquing the past, what would you do or differently as far as how you identify projects, how they get funded, where the funding source is not infinite, it's finite.
Mm-hmm.
So how you will look at that, if there'll be competition, if there's going to be some kind of criteria, what is it that you think could be done differently going forward as to how we select the next round?
I would say, again, because of the lawsuit and the timing and needing to show at that time that the group did an excellent job and didn't have
No, I'm not worried
the
about
time.
this list. I'm worried about the next list. What would
I
you
think,
do
as I
going
stated, an open process, a bidding process, let agencies or multiple agencies submit requests, and so it's an open public process.
Okay. And that would be reviewed by whom?
So that would be, my expectation would be if council, a member of council was interested in sitting that committee, obviously we'd work with council to ensure you support what we might recommend as we usually would. Stakeholders throughout the community that are involved in opioid planning might participate on it also. There's been a number of individuals that have reached out to me and expressed interest. So we might identify some of those individuals who would be a good fit.
Okay, so it sounds like you're talking about a competitive process going forward in the future?
That's what I would anticipate, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Gallagher.
Before you arrived, I was concerned about the drug court. We went back and we checked. We did approve a Fort drug court in the budget, which I did not remember. But is this shifting? And I don't need you to answer now. But is this shifting from general fund to the opioid money in? You know, they're asked for about $1 million.
It's approximately 630. I'm sorry.
With 300,000 for an assessor.
That's the staff. It was approximately 30 staff to social work staff to work with individuals to cut down on jail time, work with the courts for information. So that's for staff.
$300,000, 30 people, $10,000 a year.
It's $300,000. It's not 30 people. I apologize, but it is staff. It is staff.
Okay. If they could, and they'll be filing monthly reports as to justify all this. Okay, that's great. All these discussions, the one person in this county that knows more than everybody up here and everybody out there is the medical examiner. I think the medical examiner should be the chief operating officer of this money and where it goes and how it goes. Everybody else should be coming to him. He should be our leader in this, just my opinion.
I would just say Dr. Gilson has been great. As you know, there's been some money allocated to him on this first round, but he's been great and speak regularly about these initiatives. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Brandy, you stated the metrics. You're paying close attention to the metrics. So when do you plan on, I know it has to get started and all that, but as each of these organizations give you or that metrics information, how often will you share that with county council? So I know that some of these organizations will probably want to plan to be in the second round of funding, but we need, what I'm trying to say is we won't need to know what those metrics are of what they did prior to that before they try to go for a second round.
Absolutely, to use that for data-informed decisions. Once all the metrics are put into the system that I referenced, I also have a report that's generated that can include those, and I'm happy to share those with council, and I'll just push that report forward on a monthly basis for you.
And I also stated earlier, and I don't know if you had came in already, that I would like to have, I think this is a great list, but I'd like to know a lot more detail on each of those that are presented here.
Absolutely. Again, there's a few that I don't have the detail because of what I mentioned previously, but I can put together, actually forward, I have a detail on all these projects that I do have, and when I receive the others, I'll forward those also.
And that breaks down the staff, what they're utilizing all the money that they're going to receive.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you very much. I have a question, and I apologize if it's been asked and answered. In terms of additional residential treatment beds under Adams Board, is that number, what is that number? Because it's blurred on my copy.
That is the Stella Maris, 32 additional beds for Stella Maris. Is that the one you're referring to?
Well, it doesn't. I don't see where it says Stella Maris. It says Adams Board. And it says we'll serve approximately 260 additional clients. Is that per year? Is that, what's the term, what's the frame on that?
Sure. Just to speak to your first question, the money for the Thrive program, the St. Vincent program, and Stella Maris are all going through the Adams Board, and so that's why it's reflected as Adams on your sheet. I had updated it on mine. I can provide you with update, but again, those three are going through Adams, and then their they have subrecipients of each one of those three.
What's the third one? Thrive St. Vincent?
The Thrive program, the St. Vincent, and the Stella
Maris.
Maris. That's correct.
Okay, so the 32 beds you speak of or stated here are going to be distributed through those three different
The 32 beds, that particular item on the sheet is Stella Maris. That's
Okay,
correct. And then on
okay.
the other side of the
Okay.
paper, there's the other two, just so you know.
And so when it says 260 additional clients, from what time period is that? 260 per year, 260 in a month, 260 in infinity?
So I did ask that question for them in additional detail. I don't want to speak offhand. I did initially hear 1 year, but I would like to wait until I receive the additional information back from them.
Okay, and moving back to Metro Health is developing a opiate treatment program. Is that program going to be just an outpatient program? Do you know what the vision is? Are they going to try to get some beds in their own campus now that they're expanding?
So Metro Health is one of the other items that I don't have detail on that
Okay.
side of their program. I do on the staffing and hiring, but on that side. But I will follow up when I receive that information for you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Tron, followed by Tuma.
Thank you. I understand that the list needed to be built, and we got it out in a timely manner, and obviously more information can always be presented and be improved as time goes on. You indicated you only have half of the metrics to match up with this. Will you have the metrics by the time this body needs to vote in a final form on this in 3 weeks?
So, Councilman, I requested the metrics of all agencies by the end of this month, February. However, for agencies such as Family Children First and Metro, those have two programs that they aren't immediately ready to start, so I can't confirm that those would be available. But for the others, yes, their information would be available.
Okay, so can you present all the metrics, the 50% you have right now, can you present that to council staff so we can see what we're measuring for the dollars that the taxpayers are going to be putting forth in these?
Sure, I'd be happy to provide that as
those-
well as at the end of the month, the rest of them.
Yeah, and then the rest of them. And would it be appropriate that this body should have those metrics before we vote on this?
So the metrics that, just for FYI, the metrics that I requested are the measures that we will be measuring moving forward on a monthly basis. So the data that's for those metrics, the metric might be how many clients will be provided services. By the end of this month, I asked for each one of those metrics, but the actual number itself will be a month-by-month number. So I won't have that particular information that you're looking for, if that makes sense.
I get that the data that's going to go into those metrics on a monthly basis won't be available until the actual event takes place. But what you are going to be measuring, the definition of what success would look like, should be known on day one. And that's what you're talking. I assume those are the metrics you're talking about that are half of them already been created?
Correct. Half of the agencies approximately sent them back to me. That's correct.
And so that's what you're going to be holding those groups accountable for. As you give them $1, you're going to expect that you're going to get $1 worth of performance against those metrics.
That's correct.
Okay, and then the other half are going to be done by, but before we have to vote on this in 3 weeks at our third reading for county council.
That's correct. That was requested of them. For some of the agencies, they might send me 3 metrics, and I might look and we might talk and ask for additional. But by the end of the month, all but those few agencies we spoke about, we will have metrics for.
There's only 2 that you spoke about, as I understood, that would not necessarily be done.
The Family Children First Council, which includes 2 items, both their own item as well as the $90,000 Preventure item, one portion of the Metro Health item, and the Diversion Center, the only 3 right now.
Okay, so there's 3. All right, the 3. Would it be appropriate to hold funding for those 3 until we see actually how you're going to measure those?
We could do that if you'd like. I think the funding was already discussed as being provided to these agencies, but We can work on metrics, but some of them might be changed once they have the details of their program. So it's probably better to wait for those individual agencies.
If you're going to be measuring them against the metrics, and these are the goals and objectives, and these are the targets, and they haven't given them to you, isn't it logical that you would not want to at least see what they look like before you fund them?
Correct, yeah. And honestly, these agencies, if they don't have the metrics, they wouldn't be ready to spend the money anyway, so that's not a problem.
Well, there's allocating and then there's spending. So
Sure.
Let's hope that we're never going to spend the taxpayer money without necessarily having the metrics that you're looking for, regardless of whether they've been allocated or not. Thank you.
Okay, we have Tuma followed by Conwell and Baker.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Ms. Carney. Just to backtrack on the question Councilman Gallagher answered, I just was uncertain as to what your response was regarding the hiring of clinical assessor at $300,000. Is that an accessor or accessors? I couldn't figure that out from the.
It is, excuse me, it is multiple accessors. I had already met with Judge Sinberg about this item. I'm still meeting with Judge Sheehan and some of his administrative staff for some of the detail, but it is in fact multiple assessors. One of the questions to them was whether it would be 1 year, so more staff for 1 year, or confirmed, or 2 years but less staff. And that's something that they were going back.
Okay, well, the reason I ask is because you have in 2021 zero, so it looks like it's 1 year.
That is correct. When I put this together and worked with the fiscal office, that was one of the unknowns, and I said there could be a chance that that item was less money and also appropriated for a second year, but waiting to hear from the courts on those.
Okay, and then in a little different vein here, what time frame are you looking at, or would you think that all of these settlement funds from the opioid settlement funds would be exhausted? Are you looking at a time frame? We want this done within 2 years, or we're going to see how this plays out. As in your new position, what type of time frame are you looking at as far as exhausting these funds? Because I have heard some people say about the Health and Human Service levy, we don't need that. We have these funds. These are going to end. Mm-hmm. And so, people need to know that these are going to end, and what are we looking at as far as a time frame?
One-time funding, absolutely. I can't speak to that exactly. For the first $23 million, again, I asked for month-by-month project plan and expenditures through December of 21. As I stated earlier, I would like to see right now getting these metrics, meeting with each of the agencies, getting this first allocation going. But I would like to see even possibly by the summer or before summer to start to put out a bid process for distributing some of the other dollars, whether that immediately be the remaining $93 million or a portion of that $93 million, still to be decided. But I don't think we want to, sit on it for years by any means. I would guess 3 years, possibly.
Yeah, well, given that the crisis is still happening, mm-hmm. I certainly wouldn't want to sit on the funds. Another question is with respect to the those who have applied or have been on the list here for round mm-hmm. one. Are they going to be eligible for seeking more funds, or is it a one time for these organizations? Are they going to continue to apply and bid for these funds?
My intention is that they would absolutely be eligible if, especially their metrics show and what they're doing is working and providing really good output or services. In my eyes, why wouldn't we continue to fund them if it makes sense, which that data can help us determine. But again, then others could have the opportunity moving forward also.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Conwell is next, followed by Baker.
So, skip to Baker, Tuma my question, and she followed up with one of the answers I was going to ask.
Okay.
Oh, I like those. Thank you.
I have a question you don't need to answer, but maybe for the next time we meet. And I'm not as familiar with this as some others, but there's 4 categories here that are the highest the 3 million in Thrive Ohio and 2 million in St. Vincent's and 2.5 million Justice Center, and of course the Adams Board for 5.4. So those are the four highest that take up over half of the 23, and all of those do not continue into 2021. So that would be my first question as to, perhaps there's reasons why, but that's a question. Secondly, in zeroing in on Thrive Ohio, I don't really understand that program. It says currently Thrive Ohio certified peer recovery coaches are located 24/7, 365 days in the Metro emergency room. Mm-hmm. These funds will enable us to enhance the Metro Health program. So what kind of enhancements and how much of that $3 million is being taken for that? Mm-hmm. And to offset the same services to hospital emergency rooms throughout the county. So what other hospitals, how much is being allocated to each? What are the thoughts that these dollars will help in what Metro perhaps has modeled that's needed to be spending this $3 million, and then again, it doesn't seem to transfer over to 2021.
So I can answer a piece of that, and then go back and provide some additional detail. So, for example, the Thrive Ohio program, great program. They're people within the ER that are able to immediately connect with possible overdose victims or others. They're regularly people who have been through that before, might have previously had an opioid addiction. So that personal experience is really works very well. They've shown. The Adams Board is the one that's administering that money, working with Cleveland Clinic and UH and other hospitals to replicate that type of program. Some of the ERs, it's my understanding, also have some type of programming. And so whether expanding their current program, but the intention is to replicate that type of program that's been very successful. As I said, some of the additional detail on Metro's enhancements, I don't have those specifics yet, but I will soon. And I do know the Adams Board did just send me detail on their projects and their metrics and everything else, and I haven't been through those yet. I haven't had the opportunity yesterday, so it might provide you some additional detail myself.
So did I hear you say that Adams Board is managing this $3 million?
That's correct.
So Adams Board is not only managing the 5.4, but they're managing this 3, so that's $8.4 million that Adams Board will be managing?
So the 5.4 is for Stella Maris. So Adams Board will subrecipient that money to Stella Maris, and they are providing the additional beds. The St. Vincent Rosary Hall money, so for St. B's, that money is also going through Adams Board because in the past or regularly that's the process with them, and that would be the $2,000 for St. B's. The last item, the one that you spoke about, the which one was that one? $3 million. That money, again, Adams is managing. Some of it will go through them to Metro, some of it to the other hospitals that are replicating that programming.
Okay, so really we need to hear, and how much of the Adams Board have you heard from in their metrics? Is that part of that 50%? Are you very comfortable with that part of it?
So unfortunately, as I said, I haven't had the opportunity to go through their items, but they did send me their items for all 3 of the subrecipient agencies, okay. And it was multiple. It was a large file, so I haven't gone through it, but they have been. We spoke at length about metrics, and to date, they've been really receptive on that.
Okay, we'd like to hear more when you have that put together.
Absolutely.
Ms. Carney, what's your intention on how soon we could actually get some of this money up and running?
Council Chairman, my expectation was for this money on the fiscal agenda, if it were to be able to move. The majority of agencies that would be receiving this money are part of the new Infor system, so they could immediately start drawing down some of the funding. Some of the agencies are immediately ready to go. Some need a little bit of lead time. So my hope was as early as next month they could start drawing down that money.
So, are you requesting passage on second reading suspension?
I had intended to, but there were some concerns and items brought up today. So if you would prefer that we wait, we're able to do that. As I said, I'm waiting on some metrics from some people. I gave them through the end of February, but for some of these that are ready, for example, beds in Stella Maris, I'm thinking, the sooner the better to get those out in the community and available.
If we're serious about looking at metrics, I'm more inclined to hold it at committee, look at the metrics 2 weeks from now when you should have most of the metrics. And then if we're satisfied, then go for second reading suspension, and which would put you on the same schedule as if we had passed it out of here today but did 3 readings.
I appreciate that, Chairman. I have no problem with that. And again, being in this role for only a month, not all of these agencies, I've spoke with all of them, but not in detail. So the next 2 weeks would give me that opportunity to be able to answer your questions.
So I'm going to let the committee, we'll go with the council president.
Just a comment. I'm fine with the way you've decided to proceed. I would say that if we get to a point, it would be my suggestion that we get to a point where we don't have what we need about a part of this, that we separate it out and that we send forward what we don't let the help that's needed out there be held up because some people haven't got their homework done. That we consider separating some of it out in order to make sure that what we've got ready to go does go.
I'm totally in agreement with that. I think we should be bound and determined that as much as we're comfortable with, that we pass it out next time under second reading suspension. Councilman.
And I agree with Council President. Goals and objectives and targets and dates get people moving. Mm-hmm. If they don't think that there's a need to get things moving, they won't move as fast. If they think that there's a direct correlation between getting your requests fulfilled for that other 50%, I can think that they're going to respond in a much more timely manner.
I did previously tell them they would have to provide the metrics prior to receiving any money, but understood. Agreed.
Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Brandy, you stated that the Adams Board is going to collectively be over a nice chunk of the funding. I was just wondering, does the Adams Board have a separate fund for the opioid funds that they're receiving, like we segmented it out from their prior general accounts? So we have our own opioid fund, and we separated it out. Since they're over all of these, are they going to do the same? Or are they going to...
Through the chair to the councilwoman, because they use the new Infor system, my understanding is that they would be able to, provide the index code and access the money, but it would stay within our fund until they draw it down.
Okay, so it's not, the funding is not going to
It wouldn't be
them.
transferred all over to them up front. That's correct.
Okay, so we're going to do this on a monthly basis.
That or depending on how the projects, what type of project and what type of funds are needed, but they would be able to access that available money. The only person on the list that doesn't have access to the Infor system and would need a separate contract with the county that I'm working on would be Metro Health. And then finally, that $90,000 that's under Preventure, that may or may not go through one of the HHS offices. But other than that, it would all stay in our fund, and those agencies would access it as they needed to spend the money.
Okay, and currently, I like Chairman Miller's plan, so we can see a little bit more of the detail that you plan on sending us. But also, we've been having issues paying people. So, because of the ERP and all that. So are you working on that? So going to Council President's point, that these funds are needed in the community, are you working on that to make sure that that these agencies are not going to headbutt up against those issues?
Councilwoman, I haven't been part of the ERP process, but last week I asked about it. I met with Matt, one of the individuals assigned ERP specifically about this fund and how it's set up in the system. And we went through detail again just to make sure so I don't have that problem. So I hope I don't have that issue. Walter's office has been great in doing the work, but.
Walter, can you shed some light on that? Because we've been having issues of other people getting paid, and I would just hate if we.
Yeah, the majority of those issues were from the other departments, Health and Human Service departments, adoption, foster, payrolls that would interface. Those things are being resolved now. I believe providers have been paid. They have been behind because they had to build a fiscal connector that took SACWIS data and converted it into a format that our current ERP recognizes.
So when this plans out or starts to run, we shouldn't experience.
No, these payments would be different because they're not coming over in an automated form. These would be providers billing us and drawing the funds directly from the fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Baker is next, followed by Sean.
Yes, I would ask that the next time we meet and you bring us more detail and specifics, can you please put that in a form that is given to us so we can follow you as you describe what it is that we're spending in some kind of written report, spreadsheet, whatever you feel is appropriate, but it's hard to follow what it is that you're doing without having that written material in front of us.
Absolutely. I did put together a report or received one and tweaked it from someone else that would be a monthly report to you guys, so I can make sure that that's available and prior to the next meeting, but I will make sure for that.
Yes, and also implied as that is a spreadsheet that lists each of the recipients and what each of their metrics are.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Councilman Schwab.
Just on that same point, now that we already have this, why don't we just use the same sequence if you could? Mm-hmm. So that we now would explode it to include the metrics and just keep building upon what you already presented to us. So it just naturally flows. You're going to put another column on here with the metrics and blow them out. And then the next column will eventually be metrics have been hit and goals, objectives, distribution of cash. So you've already got the format for us. So rather than reinvent the wheel, if you could just stay with this. And to the question as far as check writing, the three of us got an update on ERP yesterday, and we were shown the number of checks that have gone out, the number of checks that are in the queue, and the number of checks that will be distributed in the very short time frame. So hopefully all of that is on its way through the system. So we were at least given assurances by Jack from the ERP package that checks not only are in the mail, checks have been sent out, and ACHs have gone through with a fairly high percentage of those. So, but proof will still be in the fact that the check will still have to be in for everybody.
Okay, seeing nothing else, we are going to pull this legislation. Tentatively, we're going to meet on March the 2nd. That's our regular meeting time at 1 o'clock. That's after the end of the month. So hopefully everybody will have those metrics ready to go. Mm-hmm. Is there any miscellaneous business? Seeing none, there being no further business, we stand adjourned. Thanks, everybody.